Our next guest has a lengthy, what you'd call business and political resume, and he doesn't suffer from name recognition problems because he's been serving for quite some time as Idaho's Speaker of the House of Representatives, and that is Scott Bedke. And now he is a candidate for lieutenant governor in the state of Idaho. Steve Millington with us too. Steve chairs the Twin Falls County Republican Party Committee, and Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning on 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. And we're not quite at 7:35 yet, but first of all, Mr. Speaker, welcome back to the program.
Well, it's good to be back, Bill. And how are you this morning, Steve?
Hey, we're doing great. Driving over here this morning, listeners need to understand that Scott had planned originally, Mr. Speaker had planned originally to be with us in studio, but there was some events that took place in his ranching operation that required his attention. So lucky him, he's out on the range this morning. And when I stood in my yard and kind of was just kind of taking a look at things, the sun was just barely, in fact, Scott and I were on the phone just after 6 o'clock this morning. The sun was shining, just peeking over the horizon into my face, and there was no wind, and I could tell that the temperature was going to be great. And then he tells me he's out moving cattle down on one of his rangelands in northern Nevada, and I said to myself, something I did wrong. all I ever wanted to be was a cowboy, and I never made it.
Well, you're always welcome out here, Steve. We got just the horse for you.
Oh boy. Is it called a Yamaha four-wheeler?
Well, you can have one of those too. We ranch, of course, in the Goose Creek drainage, which starts in Idaho and goes down into Nevada, and then comes back around and through the corner of Utah and then back into Idaho. So we have, our family is ranched in this area.
Yeah, I think we lost the connection too.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll get that back.
Okay, we'll get him back again.
We wanted to point out, by the way, he is out in the middle of the range. We should point that out.
I think he told me that this is their farm, one of their farm ranches down there, and he's working on a landline telephone from down there. So we are very hopeful of being able to keep this thing alive this morning.
I think we can. There we go. Should be ringing any moment now. There we go.
Okay.
I'd been telling him about Murphy's Law during the break anyway.
Yeah.
But we're not immune to power bumps down here.
Yes. Well, I was just mentioning, off air we were talking about Murphy's Law. And
yeah, we're on the electrical system down here, but it every now and then anyway, power bump. I just mentioning that we're ranch in the Goose Creek drainage, and that includes northeastern Nevada here this morning. It's just time to move the cattle from the one unit to the next unit, and then get back to our other business affairs there in back in the valley. So anyway, that's what we're up to here. It is a beautiful day down here as well.
I wanted to mention that a couple of months back we were talking, and the week before I had been speaking to Randy Armstrong, and he was fired up about the situation with the dams on the Lower Snake River, and we were talking at the time, and he said, boy, I really hope Scott Bedke will run for U.S. House, because he said he'd be a hands-down winner in this situation. And then I asked you about it, and you said, no, I have a ranch to take care of. I didn't realize, though, that you were looking at another office. And then I heard a few people talk about it, but I still caught me a little bit by surprise. What led to that decision?
Well, there's always been talk about coming in behind Mike Simpson at some point, and but to be completely honest with you, Washington D.C. holds very little appeal to me. Maybe when I was younger, 10 years ago or so, not that I'm old now, but anyway, that being one out of 435 people, it boils down. I think that we can make a difference for Idaho from Idaho, and I've never let the position, didn't matter whether I was just a regular legislator or assistant majority leader. I always figured that if I had time to spend away from the ranch, and away from the family businesses, that I would need to make a difference, and that's been my mantra from day one. So I feel like I can defend Idaho's future, arguably as well from Idaho as I could from Washington, D.C., and not have to put up with everything that comes with that.
And one thing I think, Mr. Speaker, that probably is not emphasized nearly enough, and that is you are probably have a better command of water and water usages within the state of Idaho and the impact on our water, and I emphasize the word our water, on our neighbors. You
Exactly.
have figured that out and can control that probably better from Oakley or from Boise than you ever could from Washington, D.C. One of your great knowledge bases is Idaho water usage. How can you best provide that for us?
Well, you know as well as I do, living in the Magic Valley, that water makes everything tick. And we had a decades-long, conflict between the senior water users, the groundwater, and the groundwater. So the surface water guys were not getting their water, and they pointed to the impacts of the groundwater pumping as to the reason. And of course, in Idaho, we manage the water conjunctively. So everything is first in time, first in right. The senior water right holders were the surface water holders, and the juniors were the pumpers. But we were able to come to an agreement. So the groundwater guys, well, the surface water guys said, "Hey, we don't want to put our neighbors out of business, and but we need what we need to make our crops and to sustain our livelihoods." Of course, the groundwater guys were in a very similar situation, but they also knew that they were taking more out of the aquifer than was coming back in, and so that things had to change. And so we're able to successfully mediate that here, and it's working great. We've stopped the drop in the aquifer. The aquifer levels are moving up, and it really pays benefits on years like this, which is an exceptionally dry year, below average. But the measures that we have taken allow everybody to go on pretty much business as usual. But for the agreement, we would be looking down the barrel of hundreds of thousands of acres being curtailed or being shut off mid-season. Nobody, that doesn't work. And but that's where we were back in 2015, and of course that was kind of the catalyst of that and the Supreme Court cases that allowed us to strike an agreement. And then that led into the agreement that we were able to do and mediated another conflict there in the Boise Valley, or in the Treasure Valley, at least in the Boise River system, where the spring runoff and the making room for the spring runoff didn't count against the senior water rights that were held not only by farmers but the other entities in the Treasure Valley. So I've been front and center on all the water issues from the very first day that I came into the legislature. In fact, it was kind of my motivator way back when, is under the Snake River Basin adjudication, the state of Idaho, as unlikely as that seems, but it's true, recommended our water rights to the federal government out here on these ranches and everyone's ranches. And that was completely unacceptable. So I jumped in with both feet and was later appointed to the legislature in 2001 and made water management and conservation not only the quantity issues, but we also got to start paying attention and taking steps on the quality issues. Our mid-snake has got some quality issues there, but I think we can do it all. I think we can, if we get the issues solved around quantity, then we have the ability to address the quality issues, and I think that's exactly where we're at now, particularly with the hate to say it, but the top-down administration. We don't want the Snake River, nor can we ever stand by and let the Snake River be managed by Region 6 out of Seattle. So from the EPA. So we've got to always be vigilant about our water, and that's why it was so concerning to me that the plan that came forth about breaching the dams and on the lower Snake, and then it made no mention. Maybe the disconcerting thing was it made no mention to the water that we ship out of the state every year to meet the biological opinion and the standards at Lower Granite. So every year, Idaho sends 427,000 acre-feet of water out of state, to satisfy the Endangered Species Act and augment the salmon flows. And so there was zero mention of that. So we're going to take so I'll jump to conclusions, and I think justifiably so.
Well, hold that thought for a moment. We've got to get to a break.
All right.
We've got more coming up. Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke, joining us this morning. We should also point out, it's Idaho House. We should point that out, too, if you're just joining us. But he is also a candidate for lieutenant governor on the Republican ticket. More coming up in just a couple of minutes. Steve Millington with us as well. Steve's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're at 60 at 7:45. The Rush Morning Update is just ahead. Bill Colley as well on 96.1 FM and News Radio 1310 KLIX. We're joined by Idaho Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke. He's also a candidate for lieutenant governor as a Republican. And we're at 57. It's 7:51. Steve Millington with us, too. Steve chairs the Twin Falls County Republican Party Committee. And Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning on 96.1 FM and News Radio 1310 KLIX. We went to the break, Mr. Speaker, and you were mentioning a couple of things about some water issues, but that also dovetails, too, into something you wanted to mention this morning about, because that's interconnected with the rapid growth we're having in this state. And a way of life is really, I think, challenged in some of that.
Well, that's exactly true. Idaho has, and the economy in our area is built around agriculture and food processing, and then all of the businesses that spring up around that. And we're blessed to live in a vibrant area, a vibrant state. It's the fastest growing state in the union. It's consistently ranked as the number one place to live, to work, to raise a family. And so anything that has to do with that is what I'm about. Our families, our faith, our businesses, that's what makes Idaho tick. And as we're experiencing growing pains, as the fastest growing state in the union, we don't want to jettison those underpinning those Idaho values that make it such an attractive place to live, work, and to raise a family. And so that's my motivation here. Is I've been in the legislature, for 20 years, a little over, and I've been in the middle of making all of the policy decisions that have made us successful, whether it's our economic policies, our transportation policies, etc. And I will, and as I transition into the executive branch, we want to carry out all of these policies so that Idaho remains a great place to live and raise a family, and to have a very positive work climate here for businesses.
And Mr. Speaker, this is Steve. I'd like to ask just one question. There was quite a significant change in the way, the methodology that can be used to benefit the Idaho Transportation Department for funding by moving some sales tax receipts over into the Department of Transportation. That allows them to, quote, borrow some money and expand our infrastructure. How big of an impact is that really on the state of Idaho?
Well, it's going to be a large impact, Steve. Typically, and most every state does this. Idaho has always based its transportation expenditures based on fuel taxes, and so every gallon of gas or diesel that you buy, a portion of that goes back into the road system. And but as you and I search for more efficient vehicles, and the trucks on the road are way more efficient, the growth in the state is not being represented by the growth in the fuel tax revenues. And so we've always been searching for a way to plug that in to the economy so that so as the economy grows, then the revenues back into the state transportation system. And maybe I ought to say not just the state transportation system, but also the local transportation systems, the highway districts and the cities and the counties all get a piece of this. And for the first time, in a significant way, we have plugged into the sales tax revenues. 4%, 4.5% of those revenues go straight into the transportation system, and that's ongoing money. It grows as the state grows, and it's going to be it's not the only answer. It's not going to be a silver bullet, but it will certainly well position us as we go into the future. And we got something that is indexed to the economy. I think it's a step in the right direction.
I was going to say we got about a couple of minutes before the break. So when we'll talk after the next break too as well. But before we do that, in this day and age, when you're running for a particular office, social media has become such a huge part in all of this. What do people do if they'd like to know more beyond any conversation they hear on the radio? Are you online, and are there various places they can go and look all of these things up?
Yeah, that is all on my website, Bedke for Idaho.
Is that with a 4 or FOR?
FOR.
Okay, and they can go through policy and everything there too, right?
Yeah, all of that will be there. And shoot me an email or leave a message there, and we can talk directly, or I can answer it back that way. That also works.
You're going to personally answer these?
Well, to a point.
Yeah, I was going to say you're going to be a very busy guy if you're doing that. Really busy.
You better enjoy your day on the range, because once this thing gets into high gear, you will never get out of the office.
Well, and I'm in a position here on the family business that I'm the fourth generation on that. My son's the fifth. He has kids that are the sixth, and it's really important to us that we maintain our Idaho way of life. I think it's important to give back to the state that has given us and our family so much, and that's kind of what I'm about here.
We've got more coming up with Speaker of the House Scott Bedke, now a candidate for Lieutenant Governor as a Republican in Idaho. We're at 7:58. Also wanted to mention Steve Millington joining us from the Twin Falls County Republican Party. He chairs that committee. And Bill Colley, too, on Magic Valley this morning on 96.1 FM, News Radio 1310, KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Fox News and a local update coming up, too. Scott Bedke currently serves as Speaker of the Idaho House of Representatives, and he'd like to be your next Lieutenant Governor. He's a Republican, joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and 96.1 FM. Steve Millington as well. Steve chairs the Twin Falls County Republican Party Committee. And Bill Colley with you, too. I'm here until 10 o'clock this morning. And we have another almost half an hour, another 25 minutes or so before we have to let the Speaker go on his way. He's got to get back to work, obviously, today.
Mr. Speaker, it's been a great half hour. Let's talk a little bit more now about your upcoming campaign to become Lieutenant Governor in the state of Idaho. Tell us, let's just kind of explore a little bit your vision for the next 10 years for the state of Idaho. You give us a little brief rundown of the multi-generation family operation. Where are we going for the next 10 years, and how can we use that to benefit current residents of Idaho and those who, dang it, want to come to Idaho? And there's a lot of them out there that want to come to Idaho.
Yeah, you can't blame them, though. This is obviously a great place to live. That's an excellent segue into talking about the future. Obviously, we'll have growing pains in probably 3 or 4 areas. Number one, education. So, all parents and all grandparents know that a quality education is essential for our kids' success. And, so we all have a vested interest in making sure that Idaho schools prepare our kids well for life. And that whatever venue they will choose to go, if they want to go on to a university setting, if they want to get an associate's degree, or some type of a certification, our school system needs to be ready to give our kids an excellent boost into life. And so we've always got to be improving our education system, and the education system starts with teachers. And you got to have a cadre of well-paid, well-educated teachers, and we can never overlook that. Now, education, we learned this last year, can be delivered in many different forms, and many parents opted for homeschool or some type of a mix between homeschool and regular school, or delivered online or not online. Anyway, it was kind of a hodgepodge, and I think we learned some things. I think we learned that all kids need to have access to technology, and they need to be able to get online. And so broadband infrastructure is just going to be more and more important as we go forward. In a like manner, our transportation system, our good old-fashioned roads and bridges, we can't overlook that. Those that came before us invested literally billions of dollars into our road system, and we got to upkeep those roads. And if we don't, then we lose them. Then it costs way more to replace them. And at the same time, we've got to make our transportation systems, particularly in the growing cities. You need to go no farther than Blue Lakes Boulevard.
That's right.
But it's that way clear through the Treasure Valley. We've got to improve the ancillary routes around our valleys, because wasting time getting from point A to point B is, that's not efficient. That's not the answer here. So we've always going to have to be found investing in our infrastructure, and at the same time, you're going to have to always be investing in your water infrastructure as well. So we've got last year over 1 million acre-feet of water left the state, and that is water that could have been put into our aquifers, could have been stored in Idaho for Idahoans and for the future. So we never want to get to the point where we say, we have to turn down this business, or we have to turn down that food processor because because of lack of water or other resources. Let's talk tax policy. We lean very heavily on property taxes. Not the state. The state doesn't run on property taxes, but the local units of government lean heavily on property taxes, and that's a tax that you pay whether you're making money or you're making an income or not. It's just due every year, and I think we've got to move away from property taxes and move towards more fair types of taxes. Sales tax, I think, is way more fair than property tax. Income tax is more fair than property taxes, but then that means that the state is going to be more it is the state that levies those taxes, and would have to be more involved in local issues. And so local control is a big deal, and we don't ever want to get too far over the line on that. So I guess as I look at my career in the legislature, my 20 years has been spent in education, in transportation, in budget setting, in tax policy, and in water. So I think that distinguishes me right there. I have the experience. You know what you're going to get with Bedke. You get a hardworking, savvy defender of Idaho here, and I feel like I know what makes Idaho tick, and what we need to do in the future. So, like I said, my nightmare is to wake up 10 years from now and say, where did our Idaho go? So that's what motivates me. That's what I'll be doing as lieutenant governor, and is executing these policies that keeps Idaho well positioned. And like we said, it becomes a cliche, but we don't want to lose what we have here. It is the best place to live. It is the best place to work. It is the best place to raise a family, and we don't want to sacrifice that at the altar of growth. And I feel very strongly about that.
You know, you referenced broadband. I had a conversation with a member of your leadership team a few years ago, Megan Blanksma, at the Twin Falls County Fair, and she was referencing how the internet has become, in her view, like a utility. She said, especially for a ranching family, so much of what you do now is via computer, and you know, one of her main goals was to see some improvements there. I was joking with, I think, the governor a couple of months ago and said it's like dial-up sometimes when I'm using it. And then looking back, it's probably, I'm exaggerating a bit, but for growth, and whether it be growth in agriculture or even growth in high tech, obviously we'd like to be able to keep up with neighboring states and the rest of the world when it comes to just bandwidth and speed.
Well, that's exactly true. And Idaho does not do a bad job there. And, you know, we have a large state, and many parts are rural, and many parts are, you know, they're just not online yet. And I think or they are in a limited kind of way. Every school is connected, but they're not every home. And if we're going to, you know, if we're not going to let our kids go to school and they have to be educated at home, then we've got to beef up our broadband system. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's Oakley or Twin Falls or, you know, we could not conduct business consistently in the state capital this year because of internet issues. I mean, so no one should have been better connected than we were, and we were consistently buffering, waiting, glitch here, glitch there. The whole state needs improvement, and just to point to the rural parts of the state, some parts of the state are very well connected, and but other parts are not, and we have traffic problems, if you will, growth again, even in downtown Boise, which you would think would be the best place to get connected and stay connected, but we saw this year that is not the case.
By the way, I got a quick note here from a rancher in Gooding County, and says, can the speaker provide background on the Goose Creek irrigation project annexation in his own backyard in the Oakley area?
You know, I don't know exactly what he's what he's referencing. I mean, I really don't, and unless it's the groundwater districts that are created. And again, groundwater districts are created so that we have an orderly use of the water, so that no one takes out more than their share, and that everybody doesn't take out more than is going in. And the Goose Creek area, of course, is in one of those districts, and as is he living in Gooding. And anyway, I'd have to know a little bit more before I could get specific.
Sure.
Mr. Speaker, that Goose Creek thing, that whole drainage area encompasses 3 states, Nevada, Utah, and part of Idaho.
Yes.
You guys have done a pretty admirable job of coordinating that across state boundaries to maximize water usage.
We do, and of course we catch all of the Goose Creek in the Oakley Reservoir there, just south of Oakley, and we're able to we've been able to extend the use of that water. A big chunk, I don't know what percent, but I would say around 3/4 of all the water that we deliver out of the Oakley Reservoir system is delivered in a pipe, so there's no longer ditch loss. Our water goes farther, and of course that puts less reliance on groundwater, which improves the aquifer, and on and on. So we've got a good system there in Oakley, but it ties back into the Snake River system. The farmers there to the north of Oakley in the Burley area have been very, very forward-thinking and bringing Snake River water back up to the south there and putting that in the aquifer. The farmers, whether they're on the west end of the aquifer or the east end of the aquifer in the eastern Snake Plain aquifer, have been very progressive and been taking care of the water. And that's why it was so disconcerting when our congressman, seemingly in a cavalier way, was loose with it. And there's a lot of questions we need answers for before we make any long-term commitments.
Now let me ask you, we all know that we have our opinions as to whether we should tear those dams out, and I think that's a really lousy idea. But let's go back. The some of this stimulus money, the COVID stuff money that
Yep.
Washington is dumping on it, some of that money can be used for water improvement. Now,
Yeah.
does that extend to maybe additional aquifer recharge facilities along the Snake River?
Well, I think that there's nexus. There's not a connection between what the federal money, the strings that are attached, if you will. Keep in mind that nearly every city, from from the West End, from Hagerman to St. Anthony, gets their drinking water out of the aquifer. And so anything that improves our aquifer, improves water quality, I think fits right in. We are certainly going to invest that money that is set aside for water infrastructure wisely in a way that will benefit future generations of Idahoans. I mean, this, just because the federal government is spending foolishly does not mean that Idaho won't invest it wisely. And so there's a big installment of money that can go towards broadband, as we've discussed. It can go towards water infrastructure, as we've discussed. And also there's a big chunk of that money that can be dedicated to sewer systems. And, the state of Idaho has never been in the sewer business before. And so how to properly allocate that out to the many cities that need to have their water treatment facilities improved, etc., will be a challenge. But the principle that we will follow is that we won't waste the money, that we will invest it in projects that will have long-term benefit to Idahoans. Again, tapping right back in, keeping it a good place to work, keeping it a good place to live, keeping Idaho a great place to raise the family, and that starts now. That starts with prudent investment, with arguably some of this imprudent spending. The money is there. If you don't take it, California will. And so I can't think of anything worse than Idaho taxpayers funding things that are going to end up in California.
Well, we've got more coming up. Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke, joining us this morning for a few more minutes. Actually, I have a question that just came in, a very good question about balance of power between Treasure Valley and the rest of the state. We might pass that one along to him in a couple of minutes, but we do have to get to a break. He is a candidate for lieutenant governor running as a Republican. Also, Steve Millington joins us. He's a chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party Committee, and Bill Colley on 96.1 FM and News Radio 1310 KLIX. Scott Bedke is the Speaker of the Idaho House of Representatives. He's a Republican. He's also a candidate for lieutenant governor in Idaho. He's with us for just about 5-6 more minutes. And we're at 60. Steve Millington is well in studio. Steve is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party Committee, and Bill Colley on 96.1 FM and News Radio 1310 KLIX. But a great question that came in via, I'll call it high technology over here on the instant messenger. And Mr. Speaker, the question was about how do we balance rural concerns versus that tremendous growth we're seeing in the Treasure Valley?
Well, that is a concern. It is kind of the natural course of events. We live in a republic, a democratic republic, where we elect officials to go represent our interests in legislatures, whether that's in Congress or in the state legislature. And those legislatures and Congress are apportioned based on population. So right now in Idaho, we have 35 legislative districts. Back when they drew the lines, they attempted to have about 48,000 people in every legislative district, maybe a few more, a few less, depending. And then they apportion Congress the same way, so that every congressional district has about the same number of people in it. And so we will reapportion the legislature, I should say a citizens committee will reapportion the legislature, which means they'll draw new lines in Idaho
or on the Idaho map, trying to make so that every district will have approximately 53,000 people in it going forward. That represents the growth. And so you can't have, so some would like to, think that there's a parallel between the nation, that is made up of sovereign states, and the way and there are 2 senators from every state to look out after the interests of the state. And of course, the House of Representatives watches out for the interests of the people and is apportioned on population. And but Idaho, but counties within the state of Idaho are basically subsidiaries of the state government, and they are not independent and sovereign. And so, there's some that always, that pine for the days where there was a senator from every county, and I do too. But the United States Supreme Court has said, emphatically that it's one man, one vote. In other words, you can't have one senator from Camas County with 1,200 citizens have the same amount of vote or same amount of representation in the state Senate as Ada County that has 400,000 or 500,000 people. And so that's the issue. So it's always going to be difficult for the rural parts of the state. What we don't want to have happen is what has happened in Nevada, where all of the legislative power is either Reno or Las Vegas, or certainly in Clark County there, and the communities around Las Vegas. That is unfortunate. If you live in eastern Washington, you hate the fact that all the power is in western Washington or eastern Oregon and western Oregon. But so the only way around that is that our area has got to, we have to continue to grow and to keep track with the growth in the Treasure Valley. And if we don't, then we've always got to be found electing officials, electing legislators and congressmen, frankly, that can go and hold their own in the legislative process that is gravitating towards the population centers. That's just how our system is set up.
Got about a minute and a half to go. Anything you wanted to say before we wrapped up?
Well, again, with Scott Bedke, you get a lot. You'll get what you've always gotten with me. You'll get a fierce, hardworking, savvy defender of Idaho and Idaho's future. And I believe that my experience in the state legislature, in the very areas where we're experiencing growing pains, will serve Idaho well as we go forward. And you'll find me to always be open and willing to have these conversations. I'm an advocate for civil discourse. It doesn't matter whether we're on social media or face to face. Our mothers taught us good manners, and we should always use those. Having said that, again, Idaho has been discovered, and what we cannot afford is to lose all of the things that made Idaho discoverable in the first place. We got a great business climate here. Our quality of life and our access to the great outdoors is unsurpassed. We live in great communities, but it's going to take planning, and it's going to take input, and we're all going to have to be, involved civically. I mean, when Benjamin Franklin told the lady on the streets of Philadelphia there, "We've given you a republic, madam, if you can keep it." Well, the way that we keep our republic is for us to stay involved, to ask these types of questions, to hold our elected officials accountable, and to make sure that they're representing our interests in the seats of government, whether that's Washington, D.C., or in Boise, or in our county seats. We've got to stay actively engaged to keep the republic. And if we do, we'll be successful. And if we don't, then we deserve, I guess, what we get.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Speaker.
Thanks, Bill.
Hey, have a great day.
I want to thank Speaker Scott Bedke for joining us. More with Steve Millington coming up, too, in just a few minutes. Steve chairs the Twin Falls County Republican Party Committee. And, of course, the Speaker is running for Lieutenant Governor as a Republican It's 8:30 on KLIX. We're at 61.